Heartsteel is the best Econ trait that's ever been in TFT, especially after its rework in 14.1. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh! I know it's crazy, but there's just so much about this trait that puts it far above everything else. Firstly, the game actually tells you how much your cash out is worth, and the cash out is guaranteed every 4 rounds. This means that it doesn't feel nearly as bad when you win when you're trying to go for those massive streaks. But it still feels really good when you min-max for the closest loss possible. And by far the biggest plus is the fact that this trait scales with stage, so you can play Heartsteel in the early game or even the late game and still get great rewards. But that isn't enough to make Heartsteel the best Econ trait ever. And before playing the PBE, I actually would have said another trait was far better. So what exactly is the incoming rework? Why are Underground and Heartsteel the best Econ traits ever? And which Econ traits were the worst? But before we get into that, I just wanted to show you guys this tweet from Mordog. Mordog is the reason why I started making TFT content, and to have him acknowledge me like this is surreal, honestly. It's crazy. So I'd like to say thank you to Mordog, but mostly I'd like to say thank you to you guys for making this possible. So let's start off by talking about the Heartsteel rework first. This rework will be coming in patch 14.1, and what'll happen is when you're about to cash out, the game will give you the option of either doing your ordinary cash out or you can raise the stakes. If you raise the stakes, then your box will go golden, you'll earn double the hearts, but if you win, then you'll lose 40% of your hearts and instantly cash out. And if you think you've seen this before, then you probably have, because this is very similar to Underground back in set 8, and this was the key ingredient that Heartsteel was missing in set 10. This adds a whole new dimension to playing Heartsteel, as now there's way higher stakes and you can have so much more control and room for skill expression. But this does make Heartsteel more difficult to play because there's now significantly more player choice and agency. But that also means that Heartsteel is much stronger now because you can achieve those higher streaks. Regardless, having that dilemma between cashing out and raising the stakes was amazing because it was so exciting. There's now so much more weight to your choices, and every time you continued the streak, the stakes got higher and higher and higher. Having to make the decision between cashing out or continuing was a nail-biting decision, and that is just so entertaining to play. Even the world's best ADC, T1 Guma Yushi, couldn't resist this back in set 8 and struggled with the same dilemma. However, Underground displayed the exact cash out, whereas Piltover and Heartsteel only display the estimated gold value, which isn't nearly as useful and tempting. It was far more interesting to see the potential cash out because you could visualize what you would get, and that dilemma between cashing out and continuing the streak becomes even harder. But the next reason outweighs that negative, which is the fact that you can invest into Heartsteel no matter what stage you're at. Heartsteel is the most splashable Econ trait ever that you can tech in at any point of the game. This was a huge problem for Piltover, where no one would ever invest into it in the late game because it would be far too late to get any value from the traits. I just don't think Piltover was really playable if it didn't hit it in stage 2. Honestly, I'd say that Econ traits like that are by far the worst traits we see in TFT. I'd say that for Piltover, and even though people loved it, I'd say the same for Mercenary back in set 6. These traits were just far too viable early and pretty much worthless in the late game. Regardless, scaling off stage makes way more sense because this enables and opens many more strategies in the mid and late game for you to pursue. But that's not the only reason why I think traits like this are inferior to Underground and now Heartsteel. The primary thing that puts Heartsteel and Underground far above the others is the guaranteed cash out. With these traits, regardless of winning or losing, you will always get your rewards, and you can play around that guaranteed cash out far easier. And that means that you can't really get griefed when you're playing these traits. For example, even if you win, you still get more hearts, and that contributes to a better reward. This is the complete opposite case compared to Piltover back in set 9, where if you got griefed and you won, you would not be able to stack that T-Hex nearly as effectively. Now of course, griefing is a form of counterplay against these Econ traits, but for traits like Piltover, Mercenary and Fortune, it was far too effective to grief. If you were playing these traits and you got griefed, that would completely sabotage any late game potential you had, and you would look to pivot out of that trait as soon as possible. This was especially true for Piltover, where if you didn't start the streak early in stage 2 and you didn't have enough stacks, then there's no way you're playing the T-Hex in the late game. Moving on, Heartsteel and Underground succeed where many traits in the past have failed, and that is by having a proper out. If you take a step back and you look at the Heartsteel units and the context around their traits, then you can see that they have a lot of ties to late game units. And this is great because it gives many clear and defined routes out of the Econ trait. And this gives a lot of room for skill expression because you can plan ahead and play around more expensive units. Something you should think about is when Econ traits are kept in late game boards. In my opinion, I think you can clearly tell when an Econ trait is bad when players don't drop them in the late game, and usually that's for one of two reasons. Either there's no clear route out of the trait, or the trait is just too strong to drop in the late game. A clear example of the former is Piltover in set 9. For most of the set, the only out was Zeri, which boiled down to some of the most linear gameplay I've ever really seen in TFT, where you just play Piltover early and play Zeri late. And a good example of the latter is Shimmerscale back in set 7, where the trait was just so strong that you gotta keep it in your late game board. Not only would you get an extra item that would be very powerful, but that item would also give you more econ to help you push levels or re-roll. And you could easily hit the first breakpoint of Shimmerscale by just playing Idus, who was a very reliable frontline tank in many comps. So having a clear route out of an econ trait is amazing because it stops the trait from stagnating and being boring. But I will admit that I am kinda torn about Heartsteel synergizing with so many 5-cost units. For example, with Heartsteel you can have Illaoi, Jhin, Kayn, Lucian, Qiyana and Yorick, which is a lot of the 5-cost units, and that leads to a very high ceiling and cap on a Heartsteel board. So I'm really split because on one end it's not boring, but on the other end it's potentially far too strong. But yeah, I think those are the main reasons why Heartsteel is the best econ trait we've ever seen in TFT. Although I will admit that after this rework, I think Heartsteel will need some very substantial nerfs. I've had games on the PvE where numerous players are playing Heartsteel in the early game and I'm not. And that means that in the late game they have so much more golden items than me and I can't really catch up to their boards. They just have so much. And I imagine that Heartsteel will be turbo contested in the next patch with everyone wanting to try out the new rework. So that's not going to be a lot of fun as well. But yeah, I'll end the video there and now I'll pass the questions over to you guys. What do you think about this Heartsteel rework? What are your thoughts on econ traits having no counterplay? Which econ trait was your favourite and which was the worst? Let me know in the comments and remember to subscribe. Anyway, check out these other videos if you want to see more from me, and as always, thank you for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.